We need to get testosterone rates up, not down. And you do that by eating meat and not eating soybeans.
All I want's proper bloody milk, not left-wing options, proper milk. What's wrong with me asking for that?
I told them I'm vegan, and they were like, oh, that's the problem, is that like you're eating this highly processed fucking soy and wheat that your body does not recognize as food.
Even the vegans are now willing to admit that they lost the battle. Veganism failed. Nobody wants to be vegan. Nobody likes vegans. Why is that?
In 2019, veganism was ready to go mainstream. Fast food restaurants were rushing to add vegan meat to their menus. Joe Rogan was hosting debates about the health benefits of plant-based diets, and awareness of meat's impact on the climate was growing. But now, 6 years later, it seems like that was all a dream. 74% of Americans think eating meat has no effect on the climate. Beyond Meat's stock has collapsed, and fast food chains are not only removing vegan options, but cooking fries in beef tallow for the perceived health benefits. Even Impossible Meat, who started with the mission of replacing meat with plants, has added animal products to their line. So, what happened? Did veganism fail? Or did someone else make sure that it did? Before we dive in, I've seen other YouTubers cover this topic, and I think most of them missed the point. People usually blame PETA or say plant-based meat doesn't taste good enough. But the truth is that the number of vegans in the US hasn't changed much in 30 years. It's still hovering at 1 to 2% of the population. So it's important to separate the culture war from veganism as a whole. And I know this video is called How Vegans Lost the Culture War, but that's not actually what happened. What did happen is more nefarious, coordinated, and dystopian. You'll see what I mean. Let's start with a rough timeline of events so we're all on the same page. In 2014, Cowspiracy, a documentary about animal farming and climate change, jump-started the conversation about meat and the environment. Vegan YouTube exploded with Freely the Banana Girl, Gary Yourofsky, and Joey Carbstrong getting millions of views. In 2016, Cory Booker, a senator from New Jersey, exposed millions of Americans to the idea of veganism for the first time, and veganism continued spreading throughout mainstream culture until 2019. But then the tone shifted. Something happened that year that triggered one of the largest coordinated PR attacks in decades. But before we get into who was behind that backlash, we need to understand what set them off. And this is actually insane. It wasn't the rise of animal rights activism or the success of Beyond Meat. It was a scientific paper. A group of scientists called the EAT Lancet Commission released a study recommending a planetary health diet. Most of these scientists were not vegan, and neither was the diet they recommended. It was similar to a Mediterranean eating pattern. Lots of fruits, veggies, and nuts, as well as some poultry, dairy, and fish. Their goal was to promote a diet that could feed 10 billion people without destroying the planet. The report's most controversial claim was that wealthy countries should drastically reduce their red meat consumption. But even that was enough to set off a global backlash. And this backlash didn't come from ordinary people. Inside a Dublin PR office, a firm called Red Flag was quietly writing talking points for the world's biggest meat producers. Their internal memos urged clients to warn the public that scientists wanted to force them to stop eating meat and that plant-based diets were a threat to rural livelihoods. These phrases soon appeared everywhere: press releases, talk radio, and Facebook comment sections. Changing Markets analyzed social media activity around EAT Lancet and found that industry groups were preparing hashtags like Yes to Meat weeks in advance to discredit the report before the public even saw it.
Is the EAT Lancet like a really important organization? Or like, why was the meat industry so triggered by this specifically when they were just kind of saying like what people had been saying for years beforehand?
This is Nicholas Carter. He's an environmental scientist and the co-founder of Institute for Future Food Systems.
So, I mean, EAT Lancet had, the first one had 37 or so academics as part of the study. I think this one had even more. A couple of them might be vegan, but that's it. This is not like some sort of push for a fully plant-based food system. It's a very, honestly, a logical health and planetary boundary focused report. It got quite a bit of attention, and they knew it would get quite a bit of attention back then, and they knew it would be integrated amongst governments across the world. So I think they saw this as a major threat.
Big Meat was so triggered that in addition to Red Flag, they sought out another PR mastermind to help them out. If you've ever seen Merchants of Doubt or my other videos about meat industry propaganda, then you're probably already familiar with the man, the myth, the legend, Richard Berman.
Rick Berman runs the food industry-funded Center for Consumer Freedom. He's on a mission to fight what he says are scare tactics being used to, well, take the fun out of eating.
He's done PR for big oil, big tobacco, and even lobbied against drunk driving laws. Rick Berman founded the Center for Consumer Freedom, which sounds really nice, but it's basically a front group created to help Big Meat. They did the PETA Kills Animals campaign, and more recently, you might remember their Super Bowl ad from 2020.
Your word is methylcellulose.
Can you please define that?
Methylcellulose. It's a chemical laxative that is also used in synthetic meat.
Big Meat also created an army of misinfluencers, which just means influencer who spreads misinformation. And I know you're going to recognize at least a couple people on this list, like Sean Baker and Ken Berry. What sticks out to me most about this list is how the meat industry doesn't rely on random meat lovers. They lean on doctors, academics, and journalists. Some of these doctors, like Sean Baker, don't even have a medical license, but that doesn't matter to the success of propaganda. All that matters is that they have an air of authority that people intuitively trust. This is the same strategy tobacco companies used for decades.
More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days? See how Camels agree with your throat.
The anti-EAT Lancet agenda may have started as corporate PR, but it didn't stay that way. As the narrative spread, it picked up allies from the far right. Although the alt-right wasn't directly affiliated with the meat industry, they both had a common enemy: those evil wokes.
Up yours, woke moralists.
Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson, and other right-wing influencers saw that the meat industry was giving them the perfect enemy to attack: scientists, progressives, and vegans. It also gave them a new symbol of resistance. Meat was no longer just food. It was freedom, masculinity, and rebellion. We'll come back to that alliance between the far right and the meat industry later, but first we need to understand the type of messaging these groups utilized to discredit veganism and why they were so effective. Also, if you like my work, please donate to Pro Animal Future. We are building a political movement to help animals. It's really awesome, link in description. The types of posts they made to cast doubt on plant-based diets fell into two broad categories. First is disparaging, which are attacks on plant-based products, diets, or climate science about animal farming. And second, enhancing, which are posts glorifying animal products as healthy, natural, or morally superior. When I started writing this script, I expected most misinformation would be about health, but the most common theme was about the Great Reset conspiracy theory. According to this theory, elites orchestrated COVID to crash the economy, create a socialist world order, and control the working class. And forcing everyone to go vegan was part of their plots to make people weak and easier to control. And to be fair, that fear that someone wants to control your food supply isn't totally irrational. Food isn't just something we eat. It's nourishment, life, vitality, and power. Throughout history, starvation has been used to control people and steal resources. Like when the US military killed the bison and destroyed cornfields to starve Native Americans and colonize the western United States. Today, food blockades in Sudan and Gaza show how starvation is still used as a weapon. That fear is real, but the meat industry hijacked it and pointed it at the wrong target. If you want to talk about elites seizing control of our food and resources, look at the corporations that dominate global meat production, not the 1 to 2% of the population that avoids animal products. I want to show you an example of these Great Reset posts, and you'll see how it works together with the second most common message: maligning alternative proteins. USDA approves Bill Gates' lab-grown meat for sale despite causing turbo cancers in human subjects. Despite the fact that there's no evidence that lab-grown meat causes turbo cancer, which is a term that was popularized as part of the anti-vax fear-mongering during COVID, these claims spread all over the internet because they play into a broader cultural anxiety that modern life feels dystopian, fake, and disconnected from nature. When you're sitting in traffic, going to a job that underpays and overworks you, it's easy to feel alienated and romanticize a simple life that's closer to nature. In that worldview, eating steak feels like freedom. In contrast, plant-based meat feels like an affront to nature, not only because it's a new technology, but also because it challenges man's dominion over the animal kingdom. The irony is that there's nothing natural about our meat supply. Animals are selectively bred, artificially inseminated, and pumped with grain, hormones, and antibiotics. Then they're killed in processing plants and packaged in plastic. And although everyone thinks that animal meat is healthier than plant-based meat, that's not what the current nutrition science says. Plant-based meats have lower saturated fat, no cholesterol, and fewer links to cancer and heart disease. Yet, the idea that veganism equals processed and unhealthy stuck because of the illusory truth effect, which says that if you repeat a lie often enough, it starts to feel true. The meat industry also capitalized on anecdotal persuasion. Anecdotes feel powerful because they bypass reason, but anecdotes can prove anything. When I went vegan, my asthma disappeared. That doesn't mean veganism cures asthma. It might have just been a dairy allergy or a change in my environment. But big meat turned misinfluencer stories into proof while ignoring the larger body of evidence which shows that plant-based diets are completely healthy. Now let's take a look at how this misinformation doesn't only affect people's diets, but actually changed public policy. In 2022, the Dutch government announced a plan to cut nitrogen pollution by reducing farmed animal numbers, since animal farming was responsible for about half of the Netherlands' nitrogen emissions. This plan came out of decades of climate science, and the goal was to help farmers and the climate. However, meat lobbyists and far-right groups reframed it as a government plot to destroy rural communities. Changing Markets identified 9 major misinformation spikes during the controversy, much of it driven by transnational far-right networks. They used the exact same narratives we covered earlier in this video, all related to the Great Reset conspiracy theory and framing climate policy as an attack on freedom. Far-right politicians and agricultural lobbies seized the anger at vegans and elites that was already simmering and turned it into a political movement. The farmer citizen movement became one of the most powerful parties in the Netherlands and even influenced elections across Europe. The craziest part is that the protests that claimed to defend small farmers were largely financed and organized by big meat corporations, which have been driving small farmers into bankruptcy for decades. I think the reason these narratives have been so successful is because of the reaction to the lockdowns and vaccines during COVID. People felt like they had no control over their lives, so they channeled that anger at elites and the government. The meat industry didn't invent that distrust, but they capitalized on it. It really sucks because switching to a plant-based food system is one of the best ways we can fight climate change. Instead, states across the US are falling for this fear-mongering and banning lab-grown meat and alternative protein innovation. So, did vegans lose the culture war? No. It was all manufactured to make sure no one noticed who's really in control. The meat industry knew that the science was against them, so they reframed reality. They turned public health advice into political tribalism, climate science into elitism, and compassion for animals into soy boy memes. While everyone was arguing about Beyond Meat, the corporations that control our food system quietly consolidated more land, more taxpayer subsidies, and more political power. Vegans became a convenient scapegoat, not because they were wrong, but because they're easy to hate. But the culture war doesn't change the underlying facts. We need to switch to a plant-based food system to create a better future for animals, our planet, and our health. And whether you're vegetarian, vegan, or eat meat, you can help us take back control from the real elites, the corporations. If you want to learn more about how Pro-Animal Future is building political power for animals, check the links in the description. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments, and I will see you next time.